The rock wasn't just strong, he taught the world how to master life. I have never believed in luck. I have always believed in preparation, presence, and the moments when courage becomes the only option left. Dwayne Ellis, a figure that could command stadiums without raising his voice, understood that principle better than anyone I had ever met. To the public, he was a symbol: strength, charisma, triumph over adversity. To those who observed closely, he was a living blueprint of persistence, a man who made choices so precise that life itself seemed to bend around him. The story begins not in arenas or film sets, but in the quiet hum of an ordinary morning, when even heroes are faced with the friction of their own existence. Ellis woke up at 5, sunlight barely brushing the skyline, and began the ritual he called alignment. Not training, not planning, alignment. Each movement was deliberate, every breath measured. Even the coffee he drank was a study in mindfulness. In the city, millions scrolled past the glow of their screens, distracted by inconsequential chaos, yet unknowingly echoing the principles he had long internalized. Observation, repetition, accountability, the simple pillars of human efficiency, were invisible to them. They had no framework to understand the gravity of a life lived deliberately. Ellis stepped out onto his balcony and observed the urban orchestra below. Horns, engines, digital ads blinking incessantly, the distant chatter of early commuters. Patterns emerged. He could predict the movements of people he had never met, the rhythm of their routines, the tiny failures and triumphs that punctuated a day without any conscious effort on their part. And then came the challenge. Not from competitors, not from the media, not even from the world at large. The challenge came from within, a test that no accolades could prepare him for. His closest friend and mentor had fallen ill, leaving a void that threatened not only the balance of Ellis's projects, but the very clarity of his mind. It was in those moments when control seemed beyond reach that Ellis's true skill emerged: resilience. Most people crumble when confronted with simultaneous chaos, but he had learned to use pressure as a catalyst. It was an almost imperceptible art, turning stress into clarity, doubt into fuel, adversity into opportunity. He began the day with an unusual meeting, digital yet intimate. A network of young athletes and innovators had contacted him, seeking guidance, mentorship, even the faintest echo of his philosophy. Normally, he would have delegated, but something about this group's raw intensity demanded his presence. He listened, not to respond, not to advise, but to understand. Understanding, he believed, was the first form of power. Power was not domination, it was the ability to shape outcomes without force, to direct potential into meaningful channels, to illuminate paths that others could not yet see. By midday, he had synthesized what he had learned from the morning into actionable steps. It was simple: instill confidence, model behavior, and create accountability structures that would allow others to rise independently. He drafted notes, schedules, motivational prompts, and shared anecdotes from his own life. Not victories alone, but failures, setbacks, and the lessons extracted from them. Yet even as he empowered others, Ellis confronted his own limitations. Success is not linear. Life, he had learned, does not reward consistency alone. It punishes arrogance, complacency, and hesitation. In private moments, he reviewed his own performance, mental, physical, emotional, scrutinizing each action for inefficiency, each decision for compromise. By evening, he was in the gym. Not for show, not for fame, but for discipline. Every motion was a testament to focus, every repetition a reaffirmation of control. Strength, he understood, is not simply measured in muscle, but in mastery over oneself. The night brought reflection. Ellis sat on the rooftop, looking at a city that glimmered as if aware of his observation. He thought about the people who would never know his name, but whose lives he had touched indirectly, through inspiration, through guidance, through the subtle shifts his example could generate. Somewhere he understood in every decision there is potential for ripple effects. Small acts of consistency, kindness, courage, when observed, absorbed, and emulated, can change trajectories. He was not infallible, he was not immortal. But in his dedication to purpose, he found permanence. That night, he penned a message for the young innovators he had met. Your path is yours to claim, but watch those who rise before you. Learn not just from their victories, but from their failures. Discipline is not punishment. Resilience is not innate. Both are cultivated one day at a time. If you persist, the world will adjust to you, not the other way around. Sleep came late. Ellis knew tomorrow would be another test, not less demanding than today. And yet, in that acknowledgement, he felt not fear but exhilaration. Life, he realized, was not about avoiding hardship. It was about dancing with it, mastering its rhythm, and using its force to carve meaning where none existed. By sunrise, he would rise again, and the city unknowingly would continue to follow the path he had lit, one disciplined choice at a time. The morning arrived with the clarity of inevitability. Ellis moved through it with precision, almost ritualistic, yet without the rigidity one might expect. His assistants called him disciplined. The press would label it exceptional work ethic. And his peers would admire the seamless control he exhibited over a day that often felt chaotic to ordinary humans. But Ellis knew the truth. It was not control that mattered, it was attention. Where attention goes, influence grows, and he had learned to focus it with surgical intent. By mid-morning, Ellis found himself at a public event, a celebration of innovation that blended technology with community development. Normally, he preferred the solitude of private strategy sessions, but today's gathering held subtle opportunities. Observing people at scale, even in structured celebrations, reveals patterns invisible in smaller interactions. How they cluster, how they defer attention, how admiration manifests in the form of mimicry, subtle gestures, and unconscious echoes. He noticed the young woman who sat at the edge of the crowd, nervously flipping through notes she would never speak aloud. She had ambition, clearly, potential unmistakably, and fear, a fear that threatened to immobilize her if unchecked. Ellis moved closer, not to lecture, not to perform, but to observe. "You're thinking too far ahead," he said quietly, almost under his breath. She looked up, startled, as if someone had touched the part of her brain that calculated risk and hesitation simultaneously. "Focus here, now. The rest will follow." It was a simple instruction, almost banal, but the precision of timing, the weight of presence, transformed it. Fear receded slightly, replaced with clarity. That was all influence really required. Not overt power, not coercion, but subtle recalibration of attention. The day stretched on. Meetings, interviews, personal reflection. Ellis moved seamlessly between domains, embodying a rare combination of charisma and consistency. Every conversation, even the trivial ones, was an opportunity to model decision-making under pressure. People absorb behavior more effectively than advice. He understood this deeply. As evening approached, Ellis convened a virtual seminar with young leaders from multiple continents. He had always believed that energy is transferable. Motivation is not taught, it's inspired. And in these sessions, he practiced what he called empathic alignment, creating a space where people felt understood, guided, and challenged without coercion. He began with a story from his youth. Not the polished version, not the victories framed for media consumption, but the raw reality. Mistakes, public failures, lessons painfully earned. Vulnerability, paradoxically, created trust. Authenticity allowed influence to flourish where commands would fail. "Discipline alone," he said, "is sterile. Courage without understanding is reckless. But when you combine awareness with action, persistence with empathy, the world bends, not forcibly but willingly, to your path." Questions flowed. Hesitations revealed themselves. Young leaders confessed doubts they had never voiced. Some feared failure. Some feared irrelevance. A few feared success itself, unsure if they were prepared for the responsibilities it would entail. Ellis listened. He did not answer all questions. Instead, he offered principles, minimal guidance, maximal perspective. He encouraged reflection, the cultivation of personal resilience, the recognition of small wins. Influence, after all, is more about teaching others to navigate the pressures of life than it is about dictating outcomes. Later, in private, he reflected on the paradox he had long recognized. The more you empower others, the more unpredictable the results. Systems, whether social, technological, or personal, have emergent behaviors that no one can fully forecast. And yet this unpredictability is not weakness, it is opportunity. He spent hours drafting frameworks for mentorship programs, incorporating lessons from psychology, behavioral economics, and neuroscience. But these were not designed merely to instruct. They were designed to provoke introspection, to challenge individuals to discover their limits and exceed them. Night fell. Ellis retreated to his private space, a room stripped of distraction where he could process the day's events. He meditated, wrote, reviewed, and rehearsed. The hum of the city outside mirrored the rhythm of his mind. Nothing was chaotic here, even if the world beyond seemed otherwise. Discipline internalized is freedom, he reminded himself. Freedom is not the absence of constraints, it is mastery over the variables that matter most. A message arrived on his personal device. It was a note from one of the seminar participants, brief, yet charged with meaning. Your story changed how I view the next step, not what to do, but how to think. Thank you. Ellis smiled. Influence is intangible. Recognition is optional. The moment a person internalizes perspective, the teacher disappears. That, he understood, was the ultimate measure of impact. He allowed himself a small indulgence. Reflection on his public persona. The rock, the hero, the inspiration. It was all useful but superficial. The real work, the enduring contribution, happened in invisible spaces, in the quiet recalibration of understanding, in the subtle nudges that allowed others to discover strength they had forgotten existed. Sleep came not as an escape but as preparation. Tomorrow would demand the same vigilance, the same attention, the same deliberate care. But Ellis did not fear it. He welcomed it. Every day is a negotiation with chaos, and he had learned how to dance with it without stumbling. And somewhere in the thousands of lives touched indirectly by his example, the world adjusted, not by force, not by imposition, but through the ripple effect of clarity, resilience, and modeled courage. Ellis observed this evolution with satisfaction. True influence, he realized, is invisible. It's not about fame, awards, or applause. It's about shaping the spaces where people grow without even realizing who guided them. By empowering others to navigate challenges, to confront fear, and to embrace responsibility, he had extended impact far beyond his immediate reach. One evening, he reflected on the paradox